with President Zelensky. He was ready to go over there. He wants peace. And of course, his point at the meeting when he was berated by J.D. Vance was that Putin has violated these ceasefires and other agreements like the Minsk agreement over and over and over again, and that we needed to have a plan, including the European troops that the British and the French have pledged, to enforce it. I was appalled by what happened. We have allies. And when you look at the economic situation right now with the tariffs that President Trump is talking about putting on our allies tomorrow, Canada, Mexico, and at the same time he's cozying up to Russia, this makes no sense at all. Who do you want as your friends? The countries that are 50% of the economy, that's us and Europe and South Korea and Japan? Or do you want to be with North Korea, Russia, Iran? That is that friend group over there. And when you look at the numbers, Russia has like 2-3% of the economy. And why would you abandon them? So, of course, at the same time, I want to help the Ukrainians. They have put themselves on the line. They've stopped Vladimir Putin from marching through their country right into Europe. And so whatever we can do to have a reset and to get the Republicans to quietly, because they won't stand up, put pressure on the Trump administration to get to the agreement that President Trump had wanted them to sign anyway, that's where we need to go to stand up with the Ukrainians instead of with Russia.
I would just note the minimal agreement that apparently does nothing for Ukraine, but hands over mining rights to American business companies. But I guess it's neither here nor there. The Wall Street Journal is reporting this evening that the United States is actually halting arms sales to Ukraine. What have you heard? Do you know about this?
I haven't heard that. And again, the Congress has appropriated money, right? That's what we do. We're Article 1. We're actually ahead of the president in the Constitution, and we did that. So it is one thing to have debates on the next budget, but what the Europeans and the Americans until now have been trying to do with Ukraine is to negotiate through our sanctions, through all of the things that are on the table, some kind of end to this war. And we certainly don't want to undermine President Zelensky, which is exactly what Vance did. And just so your viewers understand this, President Zelensky has thanked America over and over again. Vance was claiming he hadn't thanked anyone. Complete lie. He's thanked them in Congress. He's thanked them in public meetings, in private meetings. And the people of Ukraine are forever grateful to America. This is a solid ally. It's going to be an economic ally, and we need to stand with Ukraine.
Worldly now is the path to an actual lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia getting longer and more winding. With no deal after Friday's now infamous Oval Office rumble involving President Trump, Vice President Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, this afternoon, Mr. Trump was asked what he would need to see from President Zelensky to restart any negotiations for a ceasefire or mineral agreement.
Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe.
This be more appreciative message was relayed directly to Zelensky during that Friday meeting.
What you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Now, Vice President Vance was talking about saying thank you in that meeting, which President Zelensky had said. CNN more broadly found a non-comprehensive list of 33 previous times Zelensky thanked the United States, including saying he was grateful to Trump just a few weeks ago on February 12th. Earlier today, however, there was more back and forth. President Trump blasting Zelensky for saying on Sunday that a deal to end the war was very, very far away. President Trump on Truth Social writing, quote, "This is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelensky, and America will not put up with it for much longer," unquote. Then just a few hours later, Zelensky appeared to try to change his own framing of the path to a deal. Zelensky writing on Twitter or X, quote, "We are working together with America and our European partners and very much hope for U.S. support on the path to peace. Peace is needed as soon as possible," unquote. Obviously, we don't know what comes next, but the U.S. now is welcoming a European-led effort to end the war in Ukraine. This morning, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer delivered a veiled swipe at the Trump administration.
Russia is the aggressor. Zelensky is a war leader whose country has been invaded. And we should all be supporting him and not fawning over Putin.
This after we learned yesterday that the U.S. has actually suspended operations and planning for offensive cyber operations against Russia. A senior U.S. official telling CNN this could make the U.S. more vulnerable to cyber attacks from Moscow, not having that deterrent there. No word on whether Trump or Vance have asked Russian President Vladimir Putin to say thank you.
Authoritarian leader Vladimir Putin.
Vladimir Putin's not a president. He's a dictator.
We've spent 3 years calling Vladimir Putin names. That's not the point. The point that we're at now is we're trying to get the man to a table. No matter what, there always has to be a real, legitimate Ukrainian state that we have a relationship with. He found every opportunity to try to Ukraine-splain on every issue. Apologize for turning this thing into the fiasco for him that it became.
Once people learn the true nature of Vladimir Putin, my hope is that he'll change his opinion and his views.
Shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them?
The obvious problem for Marco Rubio is his public record. So we actually know when he was speaking, I guess, for himself or based on his foreign policy views, what he said. And there's the old saying, this is what democracy looks like. Well, I guess this is what MAGA diplomacy looks like. And in fairness, Marco Rubio is not the first or last person who's taken a job where you work in the administration or for a president so that you can then reflect their views. But are we reaching a point of principle where some individuals may say, sure, you have to represent the president, but if the foreign policy choices here are wrong, and you've said so, and they're some of the most important ways that we exercise U.S. power, then why are you doing the opposite of what you said you believe? That would be a question for officials in that position, in all fairness. Meanwhile, Russia has clearly benefited from aspects of this, and the Kremlin is taking one of its victory laps. They say Trump is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations to largely align with our, that is the Putin government's, vision. Now, the Russian foreign minister also praised Trump for what they're calling the common sense view, which is their way of saying thanks for agreeing with Russia. The New York Times reporting the shift after President Trump spoke with Putin on the phone. This reportedly occurred about 3 weeks ago, with Trump picking up the phone on February 12th for this 90-minute chat with Putin. And since then, the Times reports he's called Zelensky a dictator, falsely accused Ukraine of a role in the war that they don't have. I'm not actually going to repeat the exact word, but you can follow this. I'll just say Russia started this war by invading Ukraine. And then the Times notes they pressed the Ukrainian leader to accede to the administration's demands. We also have indications that on February 12th, Trump was saying Ukraine would just not recover all its territory. Now, again, he is the sitting president. He can make predictions and he can say things. But we are talking about a long-term U.S. ally that has exceeded almost all expectations, including our own intelligence agencies, in outlasting what were those first few tough days and weeks of the war. So for a sitting president to just say they're going to lose turf or they're going to lose aspects of the war is itself striking. We want to remind you as we go through the facts that Trump broke ranks with the G7. This was on February 13th, saying Russia could rejoin. In his view, remember, it was Russian aggression, which Trump also mentioned in that hot meeting on Friday, that led the G7 to expel Russia. It was for, again, going in and taking territory. In that case, the 2014 invasion of Crimea. Now, the U.S. also sided with Russia on a UN vote about condemning Russia's invasion. That was just last week. The conservative Wall Street Journal editorial board is warning that Trump seems mainly concerned with rehabilitating Putin in world councils. Over at the Pentagon, we're told that under the Trump administration, the relatively new defense secretary has ordered the suspension of offensive cyber operations against Russia. That's one of those things that the United States has done, trying to level up or have consequences without starting a hot war. The Times reports it's part of a broader effort to draw Putin into talks on Ukraine and a new relationship with the U.S. under Trump. Now, as with so many things, Donald Trump, you get some people who say, well, if he did it, it's bad. You get some people who say if he did it, it's okay. And that's not really a good way or an honest way for us to all deal with this. I've told you in other reports there are things the Trump administration has done that may work for certain people in certain ways. There's other things they've claimed they're going to do on immigration where they're not succeeding. They're deporting fewer people in these first 5 weeks than the Biden rate. So we're going to follow the facts. I've told you that's one of the key things we have to do here. And if you follow the facts on that Friday meeting and you put aside the antis and the brainwashed, the people who say it's always good or it's always bad, what you actually see is, whether you look at the Wall Street Journal editorial board or national security experts or have just any knowledge of the history of the transatlantic alliance, what we saw was an absolutely extreme anti-Ukrainian, pro-Putin-esque effort to deride the Ukrainian war resistance and to try to get something which, as of now, they haven't gotten, right? They didn't say, oh, we played hardball and then got something. So then you can look at Trump's own national security advisors. Not that they're the only people with expertise, but they are people who've sat in that room and understand how this president may approach things and think, and have the knowledge to draw on to say what happened on Friday. Was this some grand strategy? The president ended the meeting by saying it was great television. Was this some pre-concocted effort to get something done on the public stage, or was it something else? I want to show you a Trump veteran saying that it was Putin getting his way.
He appeals to President Trump's sense of aggrievement, right? That, Donald, like me, you've been treated so unfairly. And he's been very successful at it because he's a master manipulator and one of the best liars in the world.
You seem to be saying that President Trump is being played.
He is being played.
That's a view from the inside, from someone who had enough belief and support for Donald Trump to work for him.
Trump is humiliating himself. He's putting America in peril. He's putting Ukraine in peril. And he just gave the easiest win of Vladimir Putin's career. Look, you shouldn't underestimate Vladimir Putin as an opponent, right? Saying that he's a shrewd, bright, ruthless, cold, calculating guy doesn't mean you support him. But clearly, to be the dictator of Russia for this long means that he's not an idiot, right? And so you do not need to give him free wins, and that's exactly what Trump did. Putin didn't need to do anything here. He didn't need to do anything. He just sat back and watched as Trump ambushed and insulted Zelensky, and Zelensky handled it pretty well, but of course there were sparks flying. And then 72 hours later, a little bit less, now Trump is cutting all aid to Ukraine, or at least suspending it, whatever the terminology you want to use, but he's basically blocking all aid to Ukraine from the United States. Aid that was in many ways approved by Congress. I don't know if this is legal or not. The president often does have some discretion about stopping aid based on national blah, blah, blah. Whether it's legal or not, and with Trump, that's always a big question, this is a devastating move. This is handing Putin a win. Sometimes Putin scored wins by actually doing something, and he's the bad guy, but the bad guys win sometimes. Here, sitting in Moscow, he probably could have been in the bathtub scoring a big victory because dumb Donald did it for him.